The kettle gave a soft whistle as he reached for the cups. The light from the morning had not yet touched the glass of the window, but my body didn't need the sun to know it was 5:30. After 40 years of early mornings, I still woke up before the birds. The house was quiet, just as I liked it. I moved around the kitchen as if I had a map engraved in the muscles. 2 tablespoons of coffee, a splash of milk, the ceramic click of the spoon against the cup. I didn't hear Amelia's little feet. She was always light, more of a whisper than a girl walking. When I turned around, she was already sitting on the edge of the kitchen stool, her legs gently swaying, still in her dinosaur pajamas. "Grandma," she said, her voice like a secret. "Mom and Dad said they're going to take your money tonight." My hand stopped mid-stir. The air in the kitchen changed. It got heavier. I smiled, like the smiles we adults put on when we don't want a child to feel fear. "What a strange thing to say, little one." "What do you mean?" She shrugged and took a cookie from the jar. "I don't know. I was supposed to be asleep." They were talking downstairs. "Dad said you don't need so much money. Mom said that you would help." I crouched down beside her and moved a curl from her face. "You didn't dream it, right?" "No," she said. I was hidden under the sheet, but I heard them. She went back to biting the cookie as if nothing was happening. I stood up slowly, holding onto the edge of the counter, just enough to balance myself. My heart was beating too strongly for someone who had not taken more than 10 steps. Amalia finished her snack and ran to the dining room, humming. I poured the coffee, even though I didn't want it anymore. The bitterness that rose in my throat had nothing to do with coffee. When Valeria came in, already wearing heels, cell phone in hand, I had kept my fear in a corner. Valeria crossed the kitchen as if it were hers, leaving the receipt of the dry cleaners on the counter without saying a word and opening the refrigerator with one hand while typing a message with the other. I passed her the thermos of coffee that I had already prepared. She took it without looking at me. "Can you pick up Amalia from school today?" she asked finally, looking up. "Santiago has a dinner with a client, and I'm going to show 2 properties." I nodded, as I had done for years. "Of course." She smiled briefly, tense and distracted. "You're the best," she said. And then she left, the main door closing with that careful click she used when she was in a hurry. I leaned against the sink and looked out the window. The garden still kept the shape that Raphael had given it, the raised beds, the edge of stone. He had finished every inch with his hands the year after he retired, when we thought we would have 20 more springs. Instead, we had 2. After his departure, everything changed, not suddenly, but in small, silent steps. I had 3 children, each dealing with their grief in their own way, and no one was prepared. I sold the cabin, paid Santiago's credit cards when Valeria asked for it. She didn't like to say debts, just tight months. I let Julieta move into the apartment over the garage without asking for rent. It was temporary, she said. That was 6 years ago. When Valeria wanted to start her real estate business, she needed help with the down payment. I signed a check that same day, no questions asked. Raphael would have said yes, and that was enough for me. I paid for Amelia's kindergarten, then primary school, then music classes. Every time, I felt it was the right thing to do, like being a mother, but longer. But at some point, they stopped saying thank you, then they stopped asking. Now they took for granted that I would cover the expenses, and the account was low, which would keep the home in case anyone needed to return, that I would always be there, quietly on one side. I rinsed the cups in the sink, still warm from the coffee, and cleaned the counters. In the distance, I heard Amelia's laughter from the dining room. Closer, I heard the low murmur of voices behind a door ajar. I didn't want to stay in the hallway. No, I was really going to leave clean towels in the upstairs bathroom when I caught Santiago's low and sharp voice from the barely open door of the guest room. "She's not getting younger," he said. "If we don't act now, she could throw it all away." Valeria replied in a softer, but still sharp tone. "We're not stealing from her. We're protecting her. She doesn't need that much money saved. It's not safe." There was a pause, one of those that way. And then Santiago added, "And we could use it. That house is there like it's a vault." I stood still, the pile of towels pressed against my chest. My heart gave a strong and slow beat, as if hesitating between breaking or hardening. Once she signs the access, everything will be easier, Valeria said. She probably won't even notice, especially if we put it forward as support, Santiago responded. The towels slid a little in my arms, but I didn't move. I waited until their voices turned into indistinct murmurs. Then I backed down the hall, my steps careful, practiced. I went back to the kitchen and folded the towels carefully onto a chair and began to clean the stove, even though it was already flawless. My hands moved by habit, but my thoughts were elsewhere, drawing invisible lines between Amelia's whisper from yesterday and what I had just heard with my own ears. They weren't planning to ask me, they were planning to surround me. I didn't cry, I didn't feel anger yet. What I felt was something sharper, firmer, an alert that had not woken up in years, the same silent instinct that once told me a child had a fever before the thermometer confirmed it. Something was coming. That night, I called Carmen. Carmen didn't say hello when she answered. She never does. What's wrong? She said, as if she could already hear the change in my breathing. I told her everything, Amelia's whisper, the conversation behind the door, how Valeria barely looked at me anymore, as if I had become another piece of furniture in the house, useful, reliable, but not worth consulting. When I finished, there was a brief silence on the other end. Then her voice came, calm and dry as always. They're not protecting you, Elena. They're stalking you. I opened my mouth to protest, but nothing came out because a part of me already knew. I had known it even before Amalia spoke. Check your accounts, she said. Every investment, bank, your will. Anything you ever gave them access to, even in passing, take it away. I don't think they've taken anything yet, but they will, and they'll convince themselves it's for your good. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone warm against my ear. It's so calculated, I said. Carmen snorted. It's survival. Your savings, your house, your routine, they're thinking long-term. You're their safety net, Elena. But nets are not consulted, they are used. I swallowed hard. Valeria said something about helping me handle things on my own until I didn't want to continue. She'll say it's temporary. Santiago will call it tranquility, but once my name is out of the documents, I'll never get it back. I didn't want to believe it, but I trusted Carmen more than my own optimism. Act before they do, she said. Find your quiet lawyer. Don't announce anything. I looked across the room at Raphael's old desk, where I still kept the original copy of our will, the one we wrote before he left. Start there, she said, as if she had seen where my eyes looked. Then check the rest. They count on you being too polite to stop them. The line stayed silent for a moment, just long enough to hear the distant ticking of the wall clock downstairs. The next morning, I asked Julieta if she had a minute. Julieta was folding clothes in the garage apartment when I arrived. The place was warm and quiet, with a slight scent of detergent and lemon oil, as she liked it. She raised her eyes when I came in, then lowered them, her fingers clumsy with a towel that didn't need so much straightening. I need to ask you something, I said. She nodded too quickly. Okay. Do you know what Valeria and Santiago are planning? She paused, just enough to answer me without words, a pause where the truth waits behind the teeth, asking for permission. I came closer. Julieta's mouth tightened. They said you might need help, that you've been forgetting things. It's not true, I said. I know, she whispered, her eyes still fixed on the towel. But they think, or maybe they just want to believe. I waited. They're talking about a family reunion, she said at last. Soon, perhaps this weekend. They wanted to look casual, but she swallowed. They're going to ask you to sign some things. Just a power of attorney, they said. Just in case. I sat next to her on the edge of the bed, taking care not to touch the perfectly folded shirts. Did you agree? I asked. I didn't say yes, she said, but I didn't say no either. I watched her for a moment. Her hair was tied back, as it had been since university, neat, discreet. She seemed a woman who had trained to take up less space. I knew that habit well. I don't want to lose them, she muttered. If I speak, if I take your side, they'll leave me out. I'm not asking you to choose a side, I said softly. I'm asking you to see clearly. Julieta looked up then, finally meeting my eyes. And in that flash of contact I saw fear, yes, but something stronger just below, a line she had not yet crossed. I'll be there, she said, her voice small but firm. When it happens. I nodded, feeling something settle inside me. We stayed together for a few more minutes without saying much. That night, Amalia came to me again. This time, her voice was even lower. Amalia got into my bed just after 9, hugging her favorite blanket and looking unusually serious. She didn't ask to watch cartoons or have a snack, just snuggled up to me like when she was smaller, when she told me she believed the moon followed us home. I put my arm around her shoulders. "Can't sleep?" I asked. She shook her head against my side. Mom and Dad were talking again. My chest tightened. I waited. "They think you're not thinking straight," she whispered. "Dad said if you don't sign the papers, they'll tell your doctor that your head doesn't work." The words settled in the room like dust impossible to sweep away. I felt my hands get cold. I didn't move. Amalia continued speaking, her voice a whisper in the darkness. "He said doctors believe those things when adults say them." I closed my eyes, but it didn't help. My thoughts were now noises, going over every memory of the last few weeks, every strange look, every time Valeria said, "I'm sure you didn't forget," or laughed too easily when I hesitated mid-sentence. Amalia turned to me. "I don't think your head is broken," she said softly. I moved the hair from her forehead. "It's not, little one," I said. Her eyes looked at me, too wise for her 6 years. "They're not going to make you go, are they?" My voice remained steady, but my pulse did not. "They can't force me to do anything I don't want." Amalia hid her head under my arm again. I looked at the ceiling, my fingers gently caressing her back, but I was no longer in the room. I was inside a future I hadn't dared to imagine, a future where my own children would try to take away everything I had built while convincing themselves it was love. They weren't just planning to control me, they were preparing to erase me quietly, legally, with forms, witnesses, and signatures. I didn't sleep that night. Amelia's even, warm breathing was by my side, but I stayed awake until the sky paled. I kept hearing Raphael's voice from a conversation we had a month before his heart gave up. "Promise me, Elena. If you ever have to choose between being nice and being sure, choose to be sure." The next morning, I called Carmen again. This time, I didn't hesitate. "Valeria sent me a message on Thursday morning, family dinner on Saturday. Just the 5 of us. Don't worry about cooking, we'll take care of it." She added a smiley face, which somehow made it worse. By Saturday night, the dining room table was carefully set, cloth napkins, real glasses, candles flickering as if it was a celebration. Santiago brought takeout from the very expensive part of downtown and announced it as if he had cooked it himself. Julieta sat stiffly at the other end of the table, barely touching her food. Amalia was at a friend's house, conveniently out of the way. We got to the salad before Valeria put down her fork with exaggerated softness. "Mom, there's something we want to talk to you about." I nodded, my face expressionless. "Well, we've noticed lately that things seem a little overwhelming for you. The house, the accounts, everything." Santiago intervened. "We've been thinking that maybe it's time for you to let us help more, just to relieve the pressure." Valeria put her hand in her bag and pulled out a manila folder. I saw it coming before it landed on the table. "They're just a few simple documents," she said with lightness. "Power of attorney stuff. Nothing changes unless you want it. It's just in case, really." I took the papers, passed a few pages, and let my eyes skim the words without reading them. I let my hands shake slightly when putting them back on the table. Valeria softened her voice. "No pressure, Mom. We only care about you. We want to make sure you're protected." I nodded again and looked at the folder as if it weighed more than it did. I muttered something about needing time, something vague and safe. My cell phone, slightly leaning between the candle and the bread basket, recorded every word. Julieta didn't catch my eye. I didn't blame her. Santiago refilled my glass of water as if I was already halfway to helplessness. Valeria squeezed my hand as if she had just given me peace, not papers intended to erase my autonomy. After dinner, I thanked them politely and promised to think about it. I even smiled. Then I went upstairs and closed the door with a key. By morning, I already had an appointment with a lawyer. At noon the next day, I was sitting in front of a woman named Fernanda Lopez at the law office that Carmen had recommended. She greeted me with a firm handshake and not once spoke to me as if I were fragile. That alone made me trust her. I gave her everything: the recording, Valeria's text message, a list of accounts, my current will. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in an impeccable spiral notebook. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "You're not paranoid, you're cautious." We rewrote my will that afternoon. Nothing drastic. I had already divided everything equitably among my children, but now we added clauses, clear language that protected my independence, instructions in case anyone tried to question my ability. I revoked an old medical power of attorney that Valeria had once pressured me to sign. In its place, I named Julieta as co-decision maker with conditions. If she declined control, it would pass to my lawyer, not another family member. When I told Fernanda that I had chosen Julieta, she raised an eyebrow. She hesitated, I said, but she didn't lie. That's worth something. Then I called the bank, changed passwords, updated alerts, and added two-step verification for each account. I removed Valeria from an old shared access line that I hadn't touched in years, but hadn't forgotten existed. I closed the savings account that Raphael and I used for emergencies and opened a new one in my name only. When I arrived home, Carmen was waiting for me with her usual iced tea and that look she puts on when she wants to say, "I told you so," but knows you already know. In exchange, she took out a folder and laid it flat on the kitchen table. "I printed transcripts of your cell phone recording," she said, "in triplicate. We worked until dusk, labeling, cataloging, putting copies in separate envelopes. I kept one behind the spice rack, another in my desk drawer. The third went to the safe. Before going to bed, I stopped at Amelia's room door and saw her sleep with a curved hand under her cheek. The house was quiet, but something in the air had changed. The next time they came, I would be ready." The request arrived 2 weeks later. Valeria had requested legal guardianship, citing worries about my memory, my judgment, and my growing dependence on others. She attached a letter signed by Santiago, vague and self-serving, and a list of supposed incidents, none of which had happened. I didn't cry when I read it, nor did I feel anger. What I felt was clarity. Fernanda acted quickly. We gathered all my updated medical evaluations, bank records, notarized documents, the recording of the dinner, even a letter from Amelia's teacher confirming that I had always picked her up on time. We had dates, details, and enough documentation to sink their case before the judge arrived. Julieta sat next to me in the courtroom, her shoulders tense but firm. When they called her to testify, her voice trembled only once. She asked for help. I didn't give it to her, but now I will. Valeria didn't meet my gaze. She kept her attention fixed on the table, her hands so tight that her knuckles looked bloodless. Santiago stayed close but silent, letting her take the lead as always. When it was my turn, I stood with my back straight. I told the truth clearly. I didn't say anything to humiliate them, just enough to show the court that I knew what was mine and who I was. The judge didn't deliberate long. He denied the request completely. I saw Valeria's face decompose while the verdict was read. Her eyes didn't fill with tears, they filled with something worse, understanding. The fight they had started had ended, but the fracture they created would not fade so fast. That night, I sat alone in the garden, watching the light fall on the tomato plants, and I started wondering what it would mean to start over. The house sold faster than I expected. "It has a good foundation," the agent said. I smiled at that. It had been decades holding those foundations, even after Raphael left. I packed in silence, reviewing a life in pieces, the twins' toys, Amelia's finger drawings, the cans of tea that still smelled slightly of cinnamon. I moved into a small house on the outskirts, in a community for older adults, right on the edge of the city, clean, simple, with light coming through every window. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. No one left dry cleaning receipts here. No one assumed I would pick up dinner or remember appointments they never told me about. I planted tomatoes in the small flower bed in the backyard. Raphael would have made fun of my spacing, saying I never left room for them to breathe, but they grew anyway, slow and stubborn like me. Amalia visits every weekend. She brings drawings, stories from school, and always insists on checking the plants. She calls it our garden. I'll leave it to her. Julieta comes sometimes too. She doesn't talk much about what happened. Neither do I, but she brings coffee and sits in front of me with calm eyes, and that's enough. Valeria hasn't called. Neither has Santiago. I'm not waiting. Most mornings, I have my tea without rush. I read books without interruptions. Some days, I don't talk to anyone except the birds and the lady at the entrance. Those are good days, too. I no longer feel invisible. I no longer feel small. I feel like me, someone I hadn't realized I had ceased to be until I remembered how it felt to be sure. And when Amalia hugs me and says, "You're my favorite person," I believe her, because now I know that I'm worth being chosen.